Hey, it's Jen. Have you ever listened to one of the episodes and thought to yourself, oh, I wish I could leave a response to that, or I wish I could leave feedback or ask a question? Did you know there's actually a way to do that in Spotify now? I know, it's super cool. So if you head over to Spotify and search for Java with Jen podcast or Java with Jen Hearing God's Voice for Everyday Life, you may have to search all of it. And then you go and check out my most recent episodes. There are polls and Q&A options that you can weigh in on, and I can connect with you that way over here on this platform. I usually use Instagram to connect with you guys, but now with this feature from Spotify, it's a super cool way to engage with the content of each episode and talk to me directly. I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. So go head over to my latest episodes on Spotify, and let's do that right now. Hi, and you're listening to Java with Jen with your host, Jenna-Lee Samuel. All right, so welcome back. This is part 2 of marriage. I don't even know what to call this episode. We'll figure it out. But I have Andee and Pat here. This is part 2. Last week we dove into the finances and sex as 2 of the top 4 issues that really plague marriages. And so we got into that, some really great stuff with that. And this week we're going to hit culture and in-laws and then communication. And so I really especially want to get into communication because they have some great tools here. So welcome back again.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here again. Okay, so last week we hit those first 2. This week, culture and in-laws. How do you see 2 Americans that get married? How do you see culture as an issue there? And where do in-laws fit? That's a big question, huh?
You want me to start? Yeah, yes. It's a loaded question, frankly, because there are so many different nuances to what you just asked without even saying a thing.
So how would you define culture then?
Culture is a sum total of norms, traditions, values, and beliefs practiced by most people most of the time. That's what I was trained when I was in my business classes.
Okay.
So it's the majority of my traditions, it's the majority of my customs, it's the majority of my beliefs, and it's the majority of just how I see things that I practice in everyday life.
Okay.
So if I'm...
Mindsets, everything.
Yeah.
So every family has a culture.
They sure do. Yeah. And if I am working with, for example, with the Latino culture, and the culture itself and its core value says the man is in charge, the wife will submit to anything that is asked of by the man, the kids will submit to anything asked of by the wife and or the husband, and then you take that thought process that might be in the husband and you bring him into a biblical marriage with a wife who is a co-equal, but yet in his perspective he thinks, no, my mom and dad did XYZ, thus you should do XYZ.
Right.
Then it becomes an issue. We've dealt with a number of couples where the husband in most cases would think, hey, I'm the husband, what I say goes. You have no say in the matter unless I ask for it. In other words, if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you, pretty much. It doesn't work that way. And we've had to constantly tell these guys, look, your culture has merit, it has value. I respect the fact that you have that way of looking at life, but quite honestly, your biblical values in every case needs to out-trump your cultural values.
Yes.
It has to be that way. So what the word does in that sense is it levels the playing field. It says to any couple that come at us with an issue, you're just as important as the husband. You're just as important as the wife. What you say is as important to me as what you say, wife to husband. So in many cases, learning how to live biblically means you basically have to unlearn what you were grown up with and what your private logic said you should look like and what you should think like and how you should function. So like we talked about last week. And it also says I have to not only put off the old man, Colossians talks about that in chapter 2 or 3, but I have to put on or I have to relearn or I have to become new in places where I've never been before.
Wow.
That's why I need to have a mentor. That's why I need to have models. That's why I need to have other people who hold me responsible and accountable for what it means to grow up in a biblical perspective as a husband and or as a wife.
So really you just described the whole reason marriage is ever hard.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
In all the categories of practical application, culture and the way we view things, that's where the work is undoing the way I see things. And not even that I see it wrong, but if it doesn't work for him, then it's not going to work for us, right?
1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 23 says, if you are to be married, be careful because you will have problems.
Yes.
Yep.
Paul says that.
And so if you're having problems, you're in a biblical marriage.
We
you're
say
in a
welcome
normal
to the biblical marriage because
it's
that's the way it's
normal.
supposed to be.
Yes.
Now, we can give you tools to help it not be as difficult.
Yeah.
But the reality is, when you bring two sinners into a relationship and you both say, I do to the other person, I'm bringing with me my sin. Andy's bringing with me her sin. You and Stephen, you're bringing with each of you your sin patterns. So to do that means you've got to get through the old and then become new in the process of becoming a new believer.
Well, and I want to I just want to even, maybe not even use the word sin.
Okay.
Because sometimes it's not even wrong, it's just different.
It's just different.
You know what I mean? That's what I would say. Because I feel
That's
like some people feel like when they have a lot of conflict in their marriage, they begin to assume, this isn't going to work. Or, what are we doing wrong? Or, you know what I mean? There becomes a lot of shame and a lot of weight. But if you realize this is just as simple as different.
Yes.
And we just got to help different meet in the middle. And then you can shake off all the weight that shame brings and false accusation, and you can realize that it may not be two sin issues. It may just be he's an introvert, I'm an extrovert.
Yeah.
Why can't we have fun together? You know what I mean? Oh, we can. We just got to figure out what's in the middle.
Yeah.
You know?
Or
we're not better from each other. We're just different from each other.
And you know, we have talked. We teach a class called "Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts" with Leslie and Les Parrott, and it is phenomenal to see, you know, what differences you bring in, even though, okay, you're an American, I'm an American. We both grew up in Texas, but that's where it ends.
That's where it ends.
Right,
you know,
male, female itself is different enough.
That's right. You got that too. You know, but just to start to explore who you really are and how, and they do a personality profile individually.
Yeah.
And it's only between you as a couple. So it shows you how you're blending, where your likelihood of issues are going to rise up.
Yeah.
You know, and it also begins a lot of talking points, even holidays. You know,
How do you
holidays could be,
celebrate?
how do you celebrate? I mean, there's a lot of stress around holidays.
Yeah, there
you
is.
know, when family issues and all that stuff, and how to navigate, and how to take what you enjoyed from your life, what you enjoyed from, you know, each one of it, and bring it into to make your
new
own.
tradition.
Yeah.
And that you've learned to cleave. You are not stuck to your parents, and that's part of cultural too. Because even in certain cultures, the parents reserve a lot of influence, and that needs to be cut.
Right.
You honor your parents,
Right.
you know, but they are not to run your lives.
Yeah.
And if you know, and they're not to be giving you direction unless you've asked for it.
Right.
You know.
When I said I do to my wife, at that moment in time, I gave up my family of origin, and I assumed a family of choice. And in that family of choice, what I said is, you're the most important person, Andy Cooper, to me. My mom and my dad still carry weight. They still, what they
Honor
say
that.
has merit,
Yes.
but it doesn't carry the same volume of strength is what my wife says.
Right.
So I've let go of in that sense, I've let go of my family of origin, and I've picked up a family of choice.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like even differences, a lot of times that we can look at differences like they always have a negative experience.
Yes.
But I know me and my husband, we kind of had fun sometimes rewriting.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
you know, we did this as a kid, but I didn't always like that. So let's do it different, you
Right.
know, and feeling that freedom, almost like
New traditions.
Yeah,
almost.
new traditions, almost like your first time to move out of the house. I get to decorate however I want.
I get to
you
buy new
know?
furniture.
I get to buy my
Yeah.
own furniture, you know, and so it was like, in some ways,
It's
it
a
was
lot of fun. Yeah.
But I feel like what makes a difference between when differences become difficult is that when you're choosing to make the changes because you're choosing it, then it's going to automatically be easier because you're cognitive, you're mindful. Whereas when we're different by default and we're not actually thinking through, like, and I've told my husband before, I'm like, hey, listen, I've just recognized that if we're not intentionally being different, we default to what we were programmed to.
Right, and you don't even see it.
And we don't even see it, and we just act it out.
That's
and
right.
so we just have to be like intentional and cognitive to be like, oh, I don't really like the fact that, you know, there was lots of yelling in my childhood home. Let's have a more peaceful environment, you know?
And how did we want to go about that?
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
What was our triggers
Yeah.
that caused the arguments?
one of my
You know?
intentions is, do I live to serve me, or do I live to serve we? And so I've had to learn that me is no longer my worldview. We is now my worldview.
Right, right.
And if we is not happy, it's because I've not done something about the me in me that needs to leave.
Yeah, that's really good. Okay, so I have heard a lot of,
we've experienced our, a decent share, not a ton, but like in-laws. I hear some of my Christian friends, or just
Friends.
whoever friends, struggling through, parents. A lot of times it's parents not knowing the boundaries. And a lot of times boundaries aren't known if they're not communicated.
Yeah.
So how do you draw boundaries with your parents while still conveying, I love you,
Love
I
and
want
honor,
you a
respect.
part of our life, we respect your voice, but there needs to be a line. You know what I mean?
It's
tough. That can be tough.
It can be tough, and
Yeah.
it can be awkward. But the first step is you as a couple need
Have to know what you agree on.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have to iron it out. We're working with a couple right now that they haven't communicated, and it's caused all this turmoil in their marriage. And it's like, you're going to have to communicate. And you first, before you can communicate anything, because what do you want to tell them? Well, they couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
they need to, they as a couple need to look at it, articulate what they're
Together.
needing, and then as a united front, present it kindly to the parents. Just say, we're married now, and we're establishing our own home, our own ways, and this is, we don't need you to be giving us money or because those always have strings.
Right.
Or we're not going to be able to come every Sunday for dinner like we always used to.
Yeah.
Maybe once a month. Whatever y'all as a couple decide that's convenient and feels good for y'all, that's what you present.
Yeah.
And you do it with love.
Yeah.
And I just always reassure them that we love you, and make it joyful when you do come together.
Right.
Yeah, we want to ask. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and I can imagine just the fact that lines are being drawn, and even if it's done really well, doesn't ensure the parents will
No.
respond well.
No.
But it's still important.
Yeah.
It's important. And even if they don't respond well or they don't talk to you for 6 weeks, they have to understand, because it's hard for a parent who has taken care of you all their lives and you have been their focus
Let them go.
to let them go.
Yeah, it's hard.
And see them make their own mistakes trying to come together.
Yeah.
But so they have to process that.
Yeah.
And that may be emotional for a lot of moms, especially.
Right, right.
And some dads, but it's mostly the
Moms,
moms, to be able to let go.
Right.
Because the kids, if they're loved and know it, they're going to know that the parents are always there for them.
Yeah. That's true.
But it's just learning to become your one new unit.
Yeah.
And one thing that we've done that has helped couples is we encourage them to get a vision statement for their family.
Yeah.
In other words, what is it that your family stands for? What is it that you want your legacy to look like?
Yeah.
Someone defined legacy this way. Legacy is the
Influence you have on a generation.
is the influence that you have on a generation that you'll never see. So when I speak to my grandkids, I'm actually thinking about their grandkids because I'll never see their grandkids more than likely.
Yeah.
But I can put legacy into my grandkids that will affect how they treat their kids' kids. But the other thing that we do when we're working with a couple who doesn't really have any boundaries to know how they stand is put them through a vision workshop. What does your vision look like? What are your core values and what is your mission
What's
statement?
important to you?
Each one of those things are different. Vision is the big picture. What do I want to look like in 10 years from now as a couple?
Yeah.
My core values are what are those things that are important to us as a couple. Money's not necessarily important. What's more important is that I serve. What's more important is that I take care of those around me. What's more important is that I'm part of the church or whatever that might look like. And then the mission is how do I make that thing happen? What are the steps involved, specific steps to get from what I see big picture to make it a reality tomorrow?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of couples don't know how that works. And so we take them through that sometimes.
They'll talk the language, but they don't. This one couple, they couldn't talk the language because you hear it all the time. And it's a lot of general fluff, no specific steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Break
So
it
that's
down
where
and to
vision's-
make it easy.
We'll do,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a
And
segue
it's
in some ways,
changeable.
but it works.
It's not like set in stone
It's
because they
seasonal.
think, what happens if we can't do it?
Right.
Change it.
Yeah.
Adjust it. Your seasons of marriage will change. So just adjust it to what works.
Yeah.
That you're moving forward and not being stuck or going
Yes.
backwards.
Yeah. I like that too because it does create like framework. I remember as a kid, my mom had this printout on the refrigerator that was like the rules of our household. And I just remember it was simple stuff like I will not lie, because I am full of truth, or I will not this, or I will not that. And I can't think of them right now. But I remember standing in the kitchen, when we'd all just be hanging around, and I would just, be staring at the fridge, and I would just be reading it. And I still remember those little seeds of principles going in my heart.
Right.
And that became like core values that ruled in my heart because I just encountered it so much standing in my kitchen, And so stuff like that is like we underestimate how impactful things like that is.
Yeah.
But it does create like guardrails. It creates an expectation
Boundaries.
of this is what's normal and healthy for my family in my home.
But the scary part, Jen, is that a lot of couples don't know what their core values are.
Yeah.
And the kids don't either.
They don't know what they stand for.
They just
They don't know the
rules.
purpose of their marriage. And that's part of what we can do to help. And we only work with couples in the church, by the way, because there's enough issues within the church that keeps us more than enough busy.
Yeah.
But again, until they understand what they stand for and what they're redeemed by and what that should look like going forward, it's hard to have them set boundaries because they don't know what the boundary around.
Right.
They have no idea.
Right.
So that's another thing that we get involved with.
Okay. And I love something that a friend of mine who's a family therapist would say. She talked about boundaries, and she said that boundaries are, and this is great for with in-laws and stuff, because, and let me preface it, a lot of people think boundaries is really a pretty fancy, justifiable word for walls. I'm putting up walls.
No.
And that's not true. Like, boundaries are in place because they're the lines that we draw so that I can safely love you and safely love me at the same time.
Good point. I like the way you put that.
Yeah, right?
That's
Isn't that
good.
great? I didn't come up with that. So that was my friend Jessica. She's a counselor, and she told me that. And I was like, that's such a healthy way to look at boundaries because it reminds me the purpose of this is so I can stay in relationship with you.
That's right.
And so with in-laws, those boundaries will change. When I'm under my parents' roof, then the boundaries are very different. They have a right to tell me when to be home.
Yeah.
When I'm a married woman, I'm sorry, I'm going to be home when I want to be home,
See ya, mama.
Or when you and your husband have decided on.
Right, yeah, exactly. And so, anyways, that was something I wanted to mention is
like
the
that.
importance
That's
of
good.
boundaries. Okay, so with in-laws, I think that's great. Boundaries are important. You can still do it in a way that honors your parents, but your primary concern is you now are trying to build a life with your spouse.
My family
and
of choice.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I liked what you said about how your wife's voice is always going to have the greater strength of impact than your parents' voices as a married person.
That's part of covenant.
Yeah, it is. And it's important because we've seen people who they get stuck if there's conflict with the parents or there's conflict between the parents and the spouse. And they're like, shoot, now I have to pick sides, And my husband was so wise when he counseled a friend through this. He was like, listen, you're not growing old with mom and dad. You're growing old with your wife.
That's right.
You've got to go home to her arms, not mom and dad's arms. So you need a first choice, choose your wife, and then trust the Lord with this one, and that is difficult. It's difficult.
If I get old, I want my wife to push me in a wheelchair, not my parents.
Yeah.
Because more likely they won't be there.
Exactly.
She will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. And so.
Yeah, I was going to say something I forgot what you just said, but when it comes to your parents and stuff, when you're having marital issues, don't go running to your parents.
Yeah.
Don't go running to family members.
Because they have a bias. They have a built-in bias.
And you could be made up, and they're still going to remember, and they're going to throw it back, and it's going to skew things, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and it just goes forward.
Yeah.
Because they may not have the same capability of handling situations that you're growing into and learning.
Worldview.
Yeah.
And the scripture's clear. We are to leave our parents and cleave to our wives. There's wisdom in that thought process.
Yeah, there is.
But that's also when you go to a counselor or you go to trusted people that that are a little far longer and are making it through their stuff. Those are the people you want to hear from.
Yeah.
And for us in the
evidence.
church, it's biblically minded people.
Yeah. There's fruit in their life that you can point
That's
to.
right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into communication. This is a huge one. When we came to you, I didn't know. Well, no. Let me rephrase that. I could suspect communication was some of our issue, but it showed up in so many symptomatic second degree issues that it took some work to figure out exactly what communication
There's lots of
issues we were
layers in
having.
there that you had to cut through.
Yeah, because communication is emotion, it's conviction, it's
body
boundaries,
language,
it's expectation.
It's rolling of the eyes.
All the things. Yeah. So with communication, you guys had talked about to us, which this became kind of a game changer for us, the difference between, I don't know if I can use this word, but the difference between, I don't know if I can use this word, but the difference between, I don't know if I can use this word, but the difference between, I don't know if I can use this word, but the difference between, I don't know if I can use this word, but the difference between a head response, a logic response, and a heart response when someone's communicating. So, for example, for my listeners, when my husband and I would have a conflict, used to be we would just, for some reason, and you can't articulate it, but you just aren't seeing eye to eye, and you can't figure out how to get there. It just blows up into a big mess, and you're like, what just happened? All I did was try to share my feelings, and you'd walk away from it just confounded, like, what the heck just happened here? And never quite could figure it out. So after we went and talked with you, I remember a few distinct moments when things blew up, and I walked away, and I was like, what just happened? And I thought about it, and I realized I had been communicating from my heart, and I was needing a heart response from him. Something of empathy, something of, I see you, I hear you, your feelings matter. But he gave me a logic response. Well, that's not the facts. Here's the facts, and the facts are this and this. So then I felt totally unheard, and that's why it blew up, because I wasn't feeling heard. So then, as a female, I keep trying. I keep pushing the matter. Then he's like, you're nagging, so it just...
You're trying to tell him the same story different ways, hoping one of those ways,
yeah.
And he's like, glazed over, I'm done, I can't handle this.
I already gave you all the facts, woman.
Yes.
What more do you need from me?
Preach it, sister.
Right, so how does a couple recognize a logic response versus a heart response? What are maybe the identifying markers of that, and then how do they work with that so it can free up their communication?
Let me start on this one. Proverbs 4:21 says, guard your heart, for out of it come the issues of life. The word H-E-A-R-T is mentioned over 900 times in the Old and New Testament. Did you know that?
Nope.
Over 900 times.
That's a lot.
The whole heart issue. And a heart issue is basically at the core of what I stand for. Not every relationship or not every communication that I have needs to be a heartfelt communication. If I'm in a business situation, I'm doing a presentation, that's not time for what we call heart talk. That's time for logic talk.
Yeah.
Okay? Money's not working like it should. Things are going backwards and they should be going forward. That's where you talk finance, strategy, and so forth. And that has its place, and it has its rightful place.
Yeah.
But a heart talk is more involved when it comes to intimate relationships, intimate communication, intimate discussions with the person who's, in my case, the most important person to me, who is my wife. So heart talk is more of the nature that says, how do I make us better? How do I make us safe? And
Feelings talk.
Often heart talk comes back to me. So if I ask the question to Andee, how do I make us better? She comes back to me and says, well, if you weren't so damn da-da-da-da-da-da, well, that's not the answer I'm looking for necessarily, but that's the answer that I need to address.
Yeah.
Because the reality says sometimes the reason she's not safe is because I'm not being safe for her.
Right.
She can't trust me because I'm not trustworthy. So heart talk has a lot to do with being trustworthy and being safe. And in a relationship, that's where the meat of the matter is. Learning how to become safe and talk safe and to present myself in a safe manner.
Right.
Okay, let me go into...
Let's keep things as practical as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, most men will talk from the head.
Sure.
That's just their
That's
natural
how we're
bent.
driven.
That's how they're wired.
That's
We
how they're
check- we
wired.
check the
Fix
box.
problems,
Yes.
check boxes. Yeah.
And then move on.
And
Next-
move on.
next issue.
Next, we are dwellers. Our emotional makeup is, in that part of it, let's even go back to being a baby. You get circumcised on the 8th day because your blood levels are better at clotting, and that's why the Jewish babies were circumcised. There's a reason for that. In the later term of your pregnancy, the boys have a testosterone wash that kind of separates their brain. Girls don't. So they operate differently, completely
So I have different
differently
hemispheres
from
I think
us.
out of,
Yes, and we have an emotional connective highway that is intelligence. It's the normal brain stuff, and it's also emotions and everything. Our whole body is wired together. Theirs isn't, and and that has to go with our roles, and that's a whole nother. That's a whole
another
thing.
episode.
Yeah, that's
like
a whole
6
nother
episodes here.
And so, so when you're dealing with that, and you're also dealing with wounds, because if my husband has been wounded in his heart by his parents or people, he's going to have that thing locked down anyway. So he's going to operate solely out of his brain. Now, in our case,
And hold on, because when someone has a lot of wounds, their default is to protect their
heart,
and
so
shut it down.
Right.
I go
So
to
they're
my
not
head.
likely to access a lot of heart talk or heart feels
Yeah.
or all that, because it's safer to go from the brain.
Yes.
And they don't have the words.
And they don't have the words,
because
yeah.
they've cut off their feelings.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and men are walking around, you know, and they think they have a
walking
relationship
dead.
with the Lord, but they have no idea what they're missing because they have cut their emotions off. They don't even have. During some of my healing process, I was given a list of feeling words because I had locked myself down with all the abuse, and so I didn't know how to articulate what I was feeling. I was numb, you know, and even there are men that don't know how to articulate feelings because they have protected themselves all their lives.
Right.
So when you're getting into an intimate relationship, you know, I'm wanting you to fix my hurt. I want those wounds loved and softened and cuddled, and he has no idea how to do that.
Right.
You know, and that's the basis of a lot of miscommunication because we are talking from wanting to connect with our husband, and he's just going to give you a cerebral answer.
Yeah.
You know, just a practical application, intelligent, you know, and you're like, well, that doesn't do anything. Or if you want to get to the emotional issues that's the problem.
Yeah.
He can't relate.
Right.
So he shuts you off.
So a solution, what would be a practical solution? Because a lot of people find themselves in that position. I know for me it helped when I would walk away and I identified, I was looking for a heart response and he gave me logic. So then I could go back to him, which usually it was diffused by then, it was calmed down, and I'd say, hey, I think the reason it blew up is because I was looking for a heart response from you because I was talking about my feelings, and you gave me logic, and so can we try this again? Because I really want your heart to hear me, you know? And so then he was like, and it actually was easier for him because he's like, now I know what to do to succeed.
Exactly.
Right.
And you've made the distinction between one and the other.
Yes.
Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister, as you know, or the Prime Minister of England for years and years. And when they asked her, what is the secret of your success? Not only as a Prime Minister, but also in your marriage. And she said this. She said, when I'm holding court and I'm overseeing business decisions, I'm in charge and I know it, and I know that my word is the final word. So I make decisions based on that knowledge. And position. But when I get home, my husband and I work things together. Because I understand that I married a man that I will live with for the rest of my life, and it's important to me that we look at things on an equal footing. So she made the distinction. She understood that when you get into a business situation, it's all about head talk. When you get into a familiar situation, it's about heart talk, it's about feelings, it's about addressing issues that are beneath the surface that don't necessarily come out comfortably.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also helping to teach the husband, you know, I'm not here to argue. I'm here, you know, this is not an argumentative thing. I want you to hear what I'm having to say. I want you to know what's in my heart, what my feelings are.
And that's something I've had to learn personally. With Andee, everything at one point was always head talk, always. But I've had to learn, against my wife, or towards my wife. But what I've had to learn, even just recently, we're working on an outdoor project, and she had never felt safe working with me outside before, just doing things when I'm literally running the show, because I always go after her with my head. But I've had to realize that if I want her to feel safe, I've got to know when to switch. I've got to know when to get out of my head and get into my heart. And I think for successful biblical men, we have to understand when we make that switch over.
Well, what does that switchover look like? Well, give me practical, because for people, they won't necessarily know what that looks like.
Well, for example, we are working on an outdoor kitchen right now, and Andee's helping me do some of the epoxy on our countertops. And I assume that because she's been watching me, she knows what I'm doing. So my assumption would say, babe, just stop asking questions and just do this and this and this. But the reality is, babe, what is it that I can help make sure you understand before I expect you to do it right? So to answer your question,
Instead of barking.
Yeah, instead of barking. Well, not only that,
Barking orders.
Let's just get real here.
But I have to drop assumptions. I have to drop my assumptions.
I don't know how to do that
and I have to drop my expectations, and I have to make sure that we're on the same level ground before I ask of her for her help. And that's what makes her safe. For years, she wouldn't come out with me.
Well, you know, or if I ask a question, he's thinking, I've screwed up. This is, you know, and he gets mad because he's been working so hard, and he might have, and I don't know. I was like, is that hole supposed to be there? You know, and he'll get mad at me, and it's like, that's why I don't.
And then she walks back in the house.
I'm not going to deal with
so
this.
part of what I've had to learn to do is to drop my defenses and, like I said, switch from head to heart and say, okay, babe, that's a good point. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, because I'm not there to cut him off at his knees. That's
Right.
how he received it.
So really, for you to have gotten into heart, you have to stop seeing it just through your lens. You
Yeah.
see it through her lens
and the other
too.
thing I have to
And
know
try
too,
to overreach. You're learning a new language. I'm learning his
It
head
is.
language.
Yeah.
He's learning my heart language.
Right.
and
right.
I also have to realize that I've got blind spots, and I
do
don't
too.
see them
Right.
because that's why they're called blind spots. So for her to call me out on some stuff is really what a partner should be doing. Yeah, I see something that you don't see. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah.
And so if I really want to be safe for her, I can say, well, you know what? Hadn't thought about that, but that's something worth looking at. You know, so I have to recognize that in humility and in teachability, I've got to receive what she says to me, even though it's not the way I see life, but
Right.
she sees things in a perspective that I don't have.
Right. That's so good. Okay. So heart and head, and that takes some time to get used to that. But I feel like for us, a big indicator that a heart response is necessary is whenever there's any conversation that goes into feelings
Yes.
or even just processing inner thinking. Like, I feel like a lot of time processing the inner thinking, for me anyways, tends to require a heart response. At least listen
wired
and
that
understand.
way.
Because we want understanding.
Right.
And understanding usually requires an empathetic response, which is a heart response. Logic, for us, has come down to, babe, I don't know what to do about this, da-da-da-da. What would you
Car
do?
won't work. Lock my keys in the house. I can't
Yeah.
get back to the house. How
Yeah.
do you, I think of heart as feelings. I think of head as logic. That's how I make
Like
that
practical
distinction.
function.
Practical stuff. Yeah. Yeah. I don't need heart talk when I can't find my keys.
Right, yeah.
Or if we're going to paint a room, it's like, okay, what do we need? How are we going to do
Yeah,
this?
exactly.
Right.
That's
Doesn't
not
require
that's not
heart.
feeling. That's logistics.
Yeah.
Now,
Different
picking
story.
the color might require
Yeah,
a
that
little
goes
heart.
I don't like blue. I don't like green. Well, too bad, woman.
Okay, so now I did kind of switch these. I did them in reverse on accident. So heart and logic, it's important to recognize the difference of those. But even sometimes before we can get to that, or even for me to be able to process what just happened, to recognize, oh, I needed a heart response, I had to go and do what we call heart care.
Right.
Correct.
And so you guys taught us that before you can have heart talk,
Yes.
which is where you're talking heart to heart with someone, guards are down, empathy is present, there's compassion, you have to do heart care, which is where maybe I have a reaction. And instead of our human instinct is to, I blame you for my reaction because you caused this reaction.
I wouldn't
But that's-
reacted unless you did that.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's
Your
that's
fault.
really a deflection. It's
Right.
blaming them for my behavior. So instead, what I need to do is go away and do what you guys describe as heart care, where I do a self-evaluation. Why did I feel that way? Why did I react that way? Where is
Exactly.
that coming from?
Right.
And once I have peace because I've settled my own responsibility, then I can go back with my new revelation. So I kind of summarized
taught
it
you
for
well.
you. But
Yeah.
I know, I'm like,
Yeah.
man, I
I'm
just answered your
impressed.
question.
I'm so impressed.
Yeah.
So, okay, now I actually did kind of grow up with that. I grew, that was kind of built into me some. I didn't have that language for it,
Right.
but I did have that habit and that practice to some measure.
To self-aware a little
Yes,
bit.
very. I was way more self-aware. I feel like he wasn't taught to do that, so
No, he
he's had to
wasn't.
learn to do that.
Yeah.
And I had to learn to be patient.
And that's part of the
Yes.
relearning we talked about earlier.
Yes,
The
yeah.
Putting off the old and putting on the new. so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I was expecting him to function like my family did.
Yes.
Where all of
Exactly.
us
There's
were
those expectations.
exactly, right? And so I had to learn to own, okay, my expectations
You own your stuff. Yeah.
are unrealistic because he doesn't have the same tools my family did
No.
because we were taught differently, you know? And so then I had to come at him differently, more patiently, more graciously. And so what would you guys say to people who've never heard the concept heart care and heart talk? What would be maybe some key pointers for that of how to begin to develop that discipline?
Well, let me go back to Proverbs 4 that we talked about earlier. Proverbs 4:21. Guard your heart, for out of it come the issues of life. So someone said it very well. My heart, my job. Your heart, your job.
When I first heard
Bumper
that, I
sticker.
was like, what?
Yeah. So in other words,
It's true.
I can help my wife with her heart, but in a sense, I can only help her so far,
So far.
because it's really her heart.
Yeah.
Now, what
My
I can do,
responsibility.
if we're going through an issue and she needs to do heart care, what I can do is I can keep the kids from seeing her. I can keep other distractions, phone, so forth and so on, doorbells. So what my job becomes at that point is, okay, babe, I'm going to let you have the time that you need because that's what you've asked of me. Go and do what you have to do, and then when we're better, we'll come back together.
Yeah.
The other thing that strikes me is out of
There's a
some,
humility in that.
there is.
Yeah,
There's a humility going, I need
I need time.
I need time.
Yeah, and
and
it's
you
not-
need to verbalize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always verbalize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Can't read your mind.
Yeah.
That's what I was telling.
You know, I said, we've got an issue here. I said, right now I'm hurting, and
Yeah.
you know,
That's
time
very
out. It's
practical.
time.
I like
It's
that.
time out.
Yeah.
You know, we'll come together tomorrow, but I need some time away. I need to process what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling it. You know, where it's coming from, and how can I change that?
But I picked up on something you just said, babe. I will come back to you tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah. The problem too
Yes,
often
that's important.
couples get into is, okay, I'm going to do heart care. I'll see you in 3 months.
Yeah.
Or they just never come back to it.
That's- Exactly.
Or
You've
it somehow
got
gets
to
buried
come
under the
together.
rug. And
Cliffhanger.
it just stacks up.
Yeah.
But the other thing about heart care that I really like is out of Psalm 51. It says this, a couple of verses. It says, starting in verse 1, have mercy upon me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions, wash away my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions and my sin is always before me. Now, in verse 10, it says, create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence, and take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit that will sustain me. So part of heart care is saying, God,
Come in.
come in.
Show me what's wrong.
Yeah.
Shine
Give me-
your light on where it's
Give me
at.
a balanced perspective here.
Yeah.
Don't let me see it from my perspective. Let me see it from your perspective. Let me
Yeah.
hear it from my wife's perspective. Again, that question I would ask earlier. What does it feel like to be married to me? What are some of the things that I make just by natural default make it hard for her? So God, come in here. Give me a pure heart. Let me see things the way you see them. Let me be teachable. In humility, give me a new perspective and let me learn to grow into that new place. And I would say to Andee often, what do I have to do to become a better husband for you? That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Because in effect, what I'm saying is, babe, it's all yours. Take your shots. I'm an open book. Come after me.
Yeah.
But I do it because I trust her and I feel safe with her. So when I ask that question,
I
it's
put the
not
shotgun up.
It's not to say, take
Yeah.
your best shot.
No.
It's to say, babe, help me become a better husband and a better man so I can become a better covering and a better leader for you.
Yeah.
And that, most guys in my
Oh yeah,
experience
you can, yeah.
won't
They don't
go
win-
there.
Yeah.
We run about 20 guys every other week. We have a men's group that we're going through a book right now by Jimmy Evans called The 4 Love Laws. And before we did this study, I said to the guys, here's a 25-question survey. I want you to take it. I also want you to give it to your wife, and I want her to take it, and I want you to come back with both your scores.
How many guys did?
Your highest score is 25, your lowest score is 0. 2 guys took it.
Wow.
And I've done this 3 times.
And they
Guys,
To the same group?
yes, these are biblical men that love Jesus. They don't want to go there.
They're terrified of
They are
facing down their
yes.
failure.
No,
No,
so
it's
much.
more
Their
their wives.
wives.
In fact, yeah. In fact,
They don't want to face their wives.
one of the wives said, "Hey, I'm not your mother. I'm not going to do this." And I said,
Really?
"Yeah." And I said to
I
him,
thought, wow.
on
I
them.
and I
know.
said, I said
Yeah.
to him, as if I was speaking to her, I said, "You don't need a mother here, but you need someone who will carry you in your blind spots and help you become a better man. And how else will you know
Yeah.
unless you ask the right questions?"
What woman in her right mind is going to say, I don't want to do this? Wow,
Well,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. So anyway, most men that I know of that love Jesus and that are committed to accountability still won't do the survey on themselves because they don't want to know what the end result looks like,
Oh, interesting.
which is kind of sad
Yeah.
when you think about it.
I know, because it's kind of like that school of thought that's like, if I don't look at the problem, it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just kind of stick
But
my head
all
in
it
the
is growing bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's
It's-
there.
yeah.
It's just growing an uglier
Just like
head.
a weed.
Yep.
It's just a weed. You
Yeah.
know, if you don't get the roots up, you're going to
Wow.
be dealing with that weed for the rest of your life.
Okay, so let me give an example of
Okay.
one thing that I experienced that helped me. Actually, it was shortly after we learned this from you. And there was a situation where I had messaged, it was a group thread. It was actually y'all.
Oh, great.
So I learned this from you guys. But I learned it was my baggage. You know what I mean? So God
Okay.
used you to help me learn this. So I had sent the 4 of us a message that was like, "Hey, when are we gonna get together?" I'm sorry, I should have told you this before. I'm recording an episode about it.
Go for it.
Oh, gosh.
Anyways, so I had sent the 4 of us like, "Hey, when are we gonna get together?" Well, I think you ended up, Pat, messaging Stephen privately like, "Hey, when are we gonna meet up?" 'Cause
Probably.
you were
That sounds
trying
like
to be
me.
the men to
Yes,
initiate
to
the
initiate
thing, right?
that, and I'm trying to let them, because that's what needed
Yes,
to be done.
right. And so, later, Stephen was like, "Well, Pat messaged me and said we're going to go ahead and do blah, blah, blah." And I was like, well, why didn't he just respond to the group thread? Why did he ignore me? Why did he message you? You know, and I started to be like, why was I just ignored? You know, and so,
Good point.
so I actually,
and because of what you were going through, that
it
was
was what I was
totally
going through.
legitimate feelings.
Sure was.
Right, but I was able to recognize when I took the time, because I had a strong reaction. I went into the bathroom and cried about it.
Oh, no.
And no. And so I was able to take what you guys taught me, and I was like, okay, Jen, this reaction it's not appropriate for what just happened. It's way over the top.
Yeah.
And so I was like, clearly there's a button that's been pushed. And this is what you guys taught us, was when you have a reaction, there's a reaction because there's a button that's being pushed.
There's a source somewhere.
Yeah, and the
Yes.
button is there because there's a lie you're believing.
Correct.
And so I was able to take the guidance that you guys had given me, and I said, okay, what lie am I believing that's causing me to have this reaction? Because I knew in my head, I was like, I know Pat and Andee, and Pat's probably trying to teach Stephen how to be the man and take initiative with these kind
To
of
lead
things,
the
you know,
wife a
lead
little
the
bit.
wife. And so my head knew that, but my heart was having another experience,
Got
you
it.
know? So I was able to identify the lie in my heart that was, you're just the wife. You don't, my ministry
Yeah.
experience.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
just the
That's your
wife.
default.
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
default from years
Yeah.
of ministry,
Got it.
right? You're just the wife. You don't matter. You're invisible.
Which is so
It's a
untrue.
man's job, right? So I was able to recognize, oh, that's a lie. That's actually coming from way over here.
That's right.
That's not true of this situation, and that's
right.
definitely not true of their heart. And so I was able to dry the tears, own it, move on, not an issue. And that's why I never brought it up, because I knew it was totally all on my end.
Got it.
But it made me realize how, because my reaction, I wanted to text back with a snarky response. Because
I didn't know that.
I did. And well, that's why I was like, okay, Jen, you got to own your heart here. What's going on? And so, because I had been so programmed for so long
Right.
to be bypassed over that I had that defense response. And so
Got it.
I was super grateful for those practical tools to be able to apply that. And then it was just ironic that it was from a conversation with y'all. But it
I
did
never
also.
knew that until this.
I
just
know,
now.
and that's why I
Funny.
never brought it up, because it was my stuff.
Except now
It
that
was my
that
stuff.
we're live, you tell me.
Yeah.
Now that we're live, I'm sorry.
I love
That's
it.
not the way to do it.
No, that's fine.
But I did.
We're proud of you.
I know. Well, and it made me appreciative
funny.
because it felt like a safer place to have that messy moment. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Because I knew if I did bring it up, you guys would have happily been able to have that
Clearly. Yeah.
conversation in a way that was understanding. So anyways, but for me, it was a game changer. That interaction
Very
was
nice.
actually really a gift to me, because I was able to, it was the formula. Like the formula was so clear. Like, you had a overreaction. What's the button? What's the lie? And then how do you own that lie? And so I was able to correct that lie with the truth. Like, you're not invisible. You do matter. The guys were trying to be the men and trying to take leadership, and you need to honor that and appreciate that, not
Yeah.
take a lie. You know what I mean?
There's a difference between reacting and responding.
Mm-hmm.
When I react out of pain. When I respond out of empathy.
Yeah.
And so you're reacting where you should have been responding. And I don't mean to,
Right.
yeah.
But that's just a clinical.
And that's
what
what we
happens.
say to a
Yeah.
lot of couples. Are you reacting right now, or are you responding? And if
Right.
you're reacting, why? What is it, to your point that you made a moment ago, Jen? What is it? Where's that button in there that's just that red light just going flash, 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 flash? What is
Yeah.
that thing? And where is that coming from? What lie fed that light that makes it flash?
Right.
That's got you all in a panic.
Right.
When the reality is, I don't want to react. I want to respond.
Right.
Because I will never change my wife in the way she sees me by the way I react to her. I only change my wife in the way she sees me and how I respond to her.
Right.
And that's what I've had to learn lately.
Right.
And it's good to take it back to your husband and go, you know what, I just realized.
Yeah.
Because it also helps them to understand you, where that button is, and to where maybe they can identify some of the things they do to actually trip up that button too.
Yeah.
And it causes
yeah.
more conversation.
Right.
And, because in part of the heart talk is, when I express my feelings, I don't spend like an hour. It's like 3 sentences or 4, no more than that,
Because the reason for that is
Yes.
because theoretically, as you learn, I'm supposed to respond back to her. This is what I heard you say.
yeah.
Okay, so I feel like let's use as
Yeah,
an
use my
example.
situation.
I felt like I was secondhand trash, if you will. I felt like I wasn't worth the value of my opinion. I felt like I was just overlooked over everything else. And what I heard you just say is boom, 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 boom. Okay, but if you give me a long dossier of things, I can't give you a succinct response.
Right.
And what you want to know in heart talk is, not only are you free to talk to me and share your heart, but I need to have the right as the receiver to come back and say, this is what I heard you say.
Right.
This is correct.
Have a
No,
voice
I didn't
to
hear
it.
that. You didn't mean this. You meant this. Okay, I'm sorry. This is what I heard you say. Because what
Right.
that does, it enhances communication.
Yeah.
I don't assume on what you're saying. I've told you back what I heard you say.
Right.
Now, I don't have to necessarily agree with it, but I have to let you understand that I'm hearing your heart.
Right. Right.
Now, how I change is that's my choice. Creating me a clean heart. I have to be able to come back to you and become safe.
Right.
But I can't do that unless you understand that I've heard you.
Right.
You have to know that he heard me. He knows what's going on. Now it's his choice as to how he handles the situation, how he handles
Yeah.
the response.
And if he
Yes.
doesn't know, he can say, I don't know what you need. Because a lot of men,
Yeah.
especially in the big, I don't know how to help you. So it's up to us to tell them what you need.
Right.
And even if you don't know, just say, well, I don't know. I need to think about that.
Need to figure that out.
And have some more heart care.
Yeah, and that's really, for me, I began to realize, especially after that moment, like as much as and I never told it to you guys because it became a good thing. It wasn't
get
something
that.
that
It's a
needed to be
lesson learned.
addressed. Yes,
Yeah.
it was good. But for me, it was like it made me realize, especially even as you're saying, as you express your hurt or your experience, it needs to be brief. I could never make it brief with Stephen because I had never done heart care.
That's right.
I was processing with
As
Stephen.
you're talking.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
as I was
yeah.
talking, and that's not helpful for him. He's confused by the end
No,
of it, you know.
exactly.
And
I'm
then
like,
there's all these
oh.
other things that come in. It's like, oh, and remember,
Right.
'cause
So
that's what
he's
we
like
do.
overwhelmed and whatever. So what I'm saying to my listeners and what I really gleaned from their wisdom and my experience was heart care is essential because it allows me to
It's
achieve.
a prerequisite.
Yeah, it
yeah.
really is. It has to be because
Starts with
I've
you.
embarrassed myself going and responding out of pain and then sorting it all out. But now all my junk is in front of
all
whoever I
him.
just had to process
Exactly.
with. Whereas if I do it privately, I can own it. I can put the pieces together,
process
figure
on your
out
own, right.
what was my responsibility and where they could have maybe done something different. And then I could come with a succinct thought that is clear and helpful to both of us.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's just
Well
more
put.
mature, right? So anyway, so the heart care is a game changer. Taking heart care before you have a heart talk. So, okay, last thought on that because this is getting long too. We need to let you guys get to your appointment.
How long
It
have
is
we been on this
4:21. I know.
How long have we been on?
We just talk and we just talk. It's 45 minutes. So
Really?
Oh my
so much
Yes.
for the 20 minutes, huh?
I know, my gosh.
all Jen's
Okay.
fault. She's
So
been
we're
talking
going to
too
I
much.
know I've been talking too much. Okay, so we're going to wrap up this episode. The last point though you guys had made with communication is how essential listening is. What would be the one thing you'd leave our listeners with about listening?
I've taught 7 Habits for Highly Effective People for years with Stephen Covey. And one of the things he says that has just been a game changer for me, like you said earlier, do I listen with the intent of responding or do I listen with the intent of understanding?
Yeah.
And too often I was listening for the intent to respond back. You know, sorry, you've got your defenses up. Well, I'm coming after it, girlfriend. So here we go. Boom, boom, boom. As opposed to, what is it you're not saying that your body language is all over me about? If I hear, and we've seen this before, we've been in different classes with different people where we've been teaching, and one example comes to mind real quick, and that was a lady who was saying, the husband was saying, our marriage is doing great, things are fine, and he was sitting behind her. We were in a big long table.
Yes, and she started crying.
And she was right in front of him. And this guy we have a great marriage. Nothing could be better than what we have right now. And she was in front of him. He could not see her. But she was just holding back the tears, man. And I was like, oh my gosh, this poor woman. And I said to this gentleman, I said, you don't know it right now because you can't see her. But she is a broken mess right now. And she's hearing the same thing that you're saying is working, that she knows otherwise. Why is that? And we didn't do that to embarrass him, but to call him out and say, you know what? You think your marriage is doing well,
You're out of
but
touch.
what I see in front of me says otherwise.
Yeah.
But we had a right to in that setting
Yes.
because it was
They
a
gave us the
deep,
permission.
It was a deep dive class to begin with.
Yes.
And when we do a deep dive, there's no more than 4 couples,
Yeah.
and we go after the
We
deep.
go
and
after
so
for
it's already
16 weeks.
understood because
Yes.
we give them an orientation of what to
Yeah.
expect, so they can back out if they're
Right.
not.
All bets are off.
So, but for him to be so out of touch with his
Oh.
wife's state means
I
he
know.
wasn't listening well.
No, he was
Not
not.
at all.
He was not.
He wasn't drawing out her heart.
No, and he didn't care about her heart. That was the other part. He didn't
He was
care.
all about self-preservation
Yeah.
because of his wounds,
Right.
which began.
I make the money, therefore I will do what I want to do,
But it
and
was
whatever's
his
done,
wounds
it's up
with
to
his
you.
father, who was
Yes.
a pastor, who was abusive, and he had a horrible life, and then he went into the Marines,
And it just further exacerbated things.
Yeah, and so then he's now in a marriage, and it took a lot of work, and it's still being worked on.
It is.
But he's made progress.
Yeah. So the key of listening, you guys would say, is not listening to respond, listening to understand
Correct.
from the other person's perspective.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's power. That in itself, if people get that principle, like that's a game changer on
And
communication.
don't do it alone. If you can't do it alone, get help
Yeah.
from somebody that knows these kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as far as you guys, I don't know if any of my listeners are like, hey, my marriage needs help and I don't know where to find help. Can they reach out to y'all and
Absolutely.
get some even direction
Sure.
or possibly even
Yes.
set up a Zoom appointment?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Zoom appointments. We've got resources.
Okay. And so how would they go about reaching you?
My email,
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be
Pat
best.
R. Cooper @gmail.com.
Okay. Pat R. Cooper
One
at
word,
gmail.com.
at gmail.com.
Okay. That's easy enough. All right. Well, thank you guys for taking the time. I'm sorry I've made you late to your next appointment.
Can I leave with one thought?
Yes, let's do.
There's a scripture that I really like. It's in Ephesians chapter 5. It's the last verse of Ephesians chapter 5, and it says this. It says, however, verse 33, however, each of you must also love his wife, husbands, as he loves himself, and the wife see to it that she respects her husband. We heard this a long time ago, and I heard this. God is not a redundant God. He knew exactly what he was talking about. And I thought, what is he talking about? Well, the reality is this. A woman's love language is just that, her love language. She wants to feel safe. She wants to feel secure. She wants to feel like she's cherished. She's the apple of my eye. That's her persona. A husband's or a man's language is, I want to be respected. I want to be looked up to. I want to be admired. So with that in mind, go back to the scripture. It says, however, each of you must also love his wife as he loves himself. My language as a man is not to love necessarily as it is to be respected. The verse also goes on to say, the wife see to it that she respects her husband. Her language is not respect, it's love. So for a good marriage to work, I have to get out of my comfort zone. I have to get into my wife's comfort zone. She has to get out of her comfort zone and get into mine. In other words, for her to learn how to respect me and for me to learn how to love her, I have to get out of my need to be respected, and she has to get out of her need to be loved and just do the opposite. So I have to learn how to love my girl when, to me, love is not the most important thing to me.
Right.
She has to learn how to respect her husband when respect is not the most important thing to her. So what does that mean? I have to be a student of my wife. I have to know what makes her tick. I have to know what's her pleasures. I have to know what her favorite colors are, what her favorite pastimes are, what her favorite dreams look like, what her favorite visions would look like down the future. And I have to speak into those things, irregardless of what I look like or what I feel like, and vice versa.
And for every couple, those nuances are different.
And they're significant because
Very
that's what makes them
significant.
that couple.
So 5 Love Languages is a book.
Yeah, by
that
Gary
will help-
Chapman.
Yeah, by Gary Chapman.
Here's your life hack, folks. This
That's
is
right.
this is a recommendation. Give it to us. The 5 love languages.
And that's just very, very simple, and but it's very, very profound. And just because my love language might be touch, okay, what type of touch? You know, because for me, some women need lots of touch. Some women don't need that much touch.
Yeah.
And it fills their cup.
Yeah.
You know, same with gift giving or companionship. You know, you need to really go into the specifics of your own relationship, because what works for us is not going to work for you.
Right.
And Stephen, you know, so it's,
Yeah.
but it's under that umbrella.
And what works for me doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily work for you, babe.
Right. It's
So
true.
I have to know you
Yeah.
enough to know that, you know, what's important to me. A tool, going to Home Depot is not your favorite thing. It is by far one of my favorite things. So when we go out together on a date, we don't go to Home Depot on purpose because that doesn't
Unless
feed
it's
you.
your birthday.
This is my birthday. And
There
that's
we
a whole
go.
different
Oh.
animal.
He gets to be the king for the night.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I thought, you know, I'm going to change my birthday next time. I let him off easy. I had to go to 7-man stores.
What?
And watch a man movie and then went to Chinese buffet.
That's right.
Which we like it.
It was the perfect day for me.
And it was a
And
perfect
he
day
was,
for
I
him.
loved it.
His
It was
cup
awesome.
he was floating for days.
We went to
awesome.
Lowe's, we went to Home Depot, we went to Tractor Supply, we went to Harbor Freight, we went to Atkins,
Oh my gosh, I would have
or
been twitching
Atwoods,
by the end
and
of
then
it.
we did a couple of others. I forget what they were, but
I don't remember. I just know it was a blur of men's stores.
That's hilarious.
yeah.
Well, I would encourage to, actually, I don't want to miss these other two things you mentioned. For those of you guys looking for some resources, they did mention in the last episode puredesire.org.
Yes.
Which is great for couples who are maybe at that point where separation is necessary or they feel like that's their only option. Puredesire.org, it creates a pathway for them to build towards recovery.
Correct.
While in separation.
Yeah, while in
Good way of
crisis
putting
or
it.
any,
Yes.
if you're suffering from addiction, pornography, affairs, that organization has got all kinds of tools
That's
and
awesome.
groups all over the country.
That's a great resource. And then the other book you recommended was
Yes.
The DNA of Relationships.
By
Because
Gary,
it's- yes.
Gary Smalley?
Gary Smalley. Thank you.
Yes. And that book will open up a lot of conversation because you're going to see yourself in different places.
Oh, that's important. That's important. So for anyone who's listening, I know a lot of people are going to listen to the marriage episodes because maybe you're an active builder of your marriage or maybe because your marriage is struggling. And I just want you to know, A, you're not alone.
Never
Every
alone.
married
Yes.
person
Yes.
has had the point of struggle, and many more people than you realize have been at the point of, is divorce my only
yes.
option?
Crisis.
In crisis, yeah, exactly. And so if you're in that place, I would encourage you, feel free to email Andee and Pat. Email Pat at
R.Cooper.
rcooper at gmail.com. But also, like, God, don't forget that God is that third strand of the covenant that you made when you got
Yes.
married. And the Lord had to remind me of that in my marriage and was like, listen, if I can make it good, will you stay? And I had to learn how to lean into God's capacity to make things different. And it required me to die to how I thought things needed to be done or how I wanted things to be done and take up the Lord's processing in his love. And then to also trust him and leave some things to his doing and take my hands off. And so just don't forget God's involved in this if you'll let him be involved in this. And so, but yeah, reach out to Andee and Pat if you guys find yourself in that place, and they would love to help y'all. They're great. They're anointed for what they do. That's what makes them so effective. They're anointed for it. So thank you for coming on the show.
I enjoyed it.
No.
It's great
so
to have
much.
y'all.
Thank you.
It was awesome.
Sorry for throwing you under the bus
You're
on a
fine.
recording.
Don't bother me.
I know. I
Not the
figured
first
it
time.
wouldn't. I figured it wouldn't.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. For those of you who've rated or shared this podcast on social media, thank you. Reading your comments and reviews always means so much to me. Listen, let's stay connected. Come follow me on Instagram at Java with Jen, where you can follow the latest and say hey. It's a really great way to stay in touch. Many of you have also asked how you can support the show. You can make donations through the Anchor app or on Patreon, or of course by sharing, rating, and reviewing on social media and iTunes as well. Thank you to each of you for your ongoing support. Your heartfelt feedback always reminds me why I do this. Until next time, remember, you've got this, and God's got you.
Okay, so for today's life hack, I want to share this set of books that is incredible. I'm going to stay in the vein of marriage. And there's one that's for husbands. It's called If Only He Knew by Gary Smalley, and it's a valuable guide to knowing, understanding, and loving your wife. And the counterpart is for women. It says For Better or For Best, a valuable guide to knowing, understanding, and loving your husband. And so the men's one is like written for men in the way men like. It's like very practical, very to-do list, very like function first. And for the women, it's actually a lot more of how to motivate and inspire your husband to be more of what you would love for him to be for you. Because let's be honest, women, we're really the more demanding side of the relationship. Emotionally, we have more needs. So anyways, but I love these books. I referenced his book while I was talking with Andee and Pat in the last episode, where he mentioned in all of his counseling work, he found that 97 or 98 or whatever it was, % of marriages came down to what the husband was not doing. And so that just means guys need a checklist. Guys need to know, like, how many men are actually not taught fundamentally and practically how to be good husbands anymore. It used to be a thing that fathers took pride in teaching their sons how to be gentlemen and good husbands, but that's not even a thing anymore. And so these poor, sweet husbands want to do their best, they want to succeed, and they just don't know what to do. So this book is really designed to help them, but then they have the women's one to teach us women how to nurture that process, how to use our female influence to persuade and empower our husbands in the best ways. So these books have been super great, and I would definitely recommend them. So there's your life hack for this week. I hope you guys loved the episode. See you next week. Next week will be Gina Lamorte, celebrity, fashion stylist, and designer. She's been on Oprah. She's been on Style People Watch. She's been in People magazine. She was the stylist for People for a long time. And so you're going to want to come back and listen, because she really talks about how to crack open and pursue and work on your dreams. She has a whole ministry of how to help people discover and empower them to pursue their dreams. It's actually really amazing, and she is the sweetest. So come back next week to listen for her. All right, catch you later. Enjoy your week, guys. You guys, I'm hiding in my closet trying to get away from the noise of my children to record this for you. Anyways, you guys loved last week's episode with Andee and Pat, who are both friends of ours and marriage experts. I call them experts because they have been the most resourceful, helpful people in the way of marriage that we have encountered. So they talked about sex and money last week, and you guys loved that. Well, this week they're hitting some heavier topics, which is in-laws or family culture, family of origin culture, and communication. These are two of the majorly weightiest areas of married couples' lives. So we're going to dig deep into this. They've got some really great practical stuff, so you might even want to take notes and share it with a friend. All right, let's cue that intro music.